what we wanted to do with this exhibition is provide Australian audiences with an opportunity to see what's being created within Britain right now, as a contrast, I guess, to what's actually being created in studios around Australia. So the works, I think, that are presented in the exhibition are instantly engaging and captivating. So they really invite audiences to have an opinion. So whether people like them or they hate them, whether they know a little or a lot about art, they're actually encouraged to enter a dialogue, and you're actually seeing that within audiences as they access these works. And that's the exciting part of the exhibition. The idea of a performance element within a lot of the works that have been created is another really interesting aspect of the works exhibited here. And it takes various forms and sort of unexpected forms. For example, the very dramatic, cinematic paintings of Jonathan Wateridge. You look at that and you think, well, you know, that the whole point of that painting is the painting itself, but he actually creates scale models of his paintings and sort of stages them and with lighting and so forth, and then takes photographs of that, and it's from the photographs that he produces his paintings. Toby Ziegler is another artist where process, again, he's a painter, and you'd look at the work and you think it's all about painting, but you know, it involves process, and that sort of, he develops a composition on a computer program as this idea of removing the hand of the artist, and then produces these sort of quite monumental canvases. And when you first look at them, you automatically assume that they're a screen print and that they are computer generated, and it's not until you actually go sort of quite up close to these paintings that you start to see evidence of the human hand within the brushwork. As another example, within sculpture, Juliana Sakura Light, who does those quite beautiful sculptures which are essentially about, they're figurative sculptures in essence, and about creating sculptures of her own spatial presence. But the way in which she creates them is actually to either sort of dig up or dig down into blocks of clay. So it's about sort of her physical space within time, and she actually does that naked. So I think that she's sort of quite a beautiful, attractive female, and so that sort of adds another layer, another dimension to the finished sculpture. One of the interesting aspects of this exhibition in terms of tracking sort of themes or trends is this almost DIY approach to making art. So there's a lot of sort of assemblages that are made out of quite crude, recycled materials, and just almost thrown together in a way that gives an appearance that anybody could do it. But it's actually interesting to quote Tracey Emin in relation to the bed that she made. And she's like, people will look at this and they will say, well, I could have done that. And she said, but it's actually the role of the artist to have that vision. Most people would have looked at that scene and said, oh gosh, what a mess, I need to clean it up. Whereas as an artist, she saw it as a work of art and made it then into a work of art. So, while I think it's when people see very apparently simple ideas well executed, I think, well, I could do that, but they would never have had the idea in the first place, and they would never have had the courage to put it out there. What we're seeing with these artists is much more of an engagement with the objects and the process of making. So if we think of Steve Bishop's work, It's Hard to Make a Stand, that's very much about where he is as an artist now. He's interested in assemblage and found objects, so he found that sort of horse, or purchased that horse. The blue plastic on it is actually the plastic wrap that the horse turned up in, and then he threw quite randomly a fur coat over the horse's head and sort of looked at it and realised at that point that the horse actually starts to take on the image of a dog. So it's about how you can create new narratives from apparently sort of random juxtapositions. A lot of the materials that the artists are using, by the very nature that they're sort of using recycled materials, are obviously going to break down over time. And even the complex installations, so the example of a work, say, like Graham Hudson, which involves fans and lights and garbage bags. So obviously it's going, and tape, obviously it's going to break down over time, and also each time it's installed, it's going to look slightly different. But it's almost that process has become part of the work. When that work is, each time that work is installed, it's actually videoed for Graham Hudson, or for part of the work ultimately. So that process of installing it and how it exists in a particular time and place is sort of part of the critique of the work. So as guardians of objects of cultural worth, which I guess is sort of the most fundamental and important aspect of my job, we do have a responsibility, I guess, to preserve these works over time as best as we can. But it's also significant or important that we maintain the integrity of the work, which has to be sort of in keeping with the artist's wishes. And so some of these works, this idea of the ephemeral is, part of their critique. And even if we think of an artist such as Carla Black, when you look at her installations, which again, but sort of found materials, plastics and so forth, it is about transience. An inherent part of that is the way in which these materials, these plastics, are actually biodegrading over time. So, it does present very challenging and interesting conservation problems, but I guess it's just sort of managing that as best as we can. Another really strong trend that we're actually seeing within this exhibition is the way in which artists are engaging with past art historic movements and traditions in order to create something new, in a sense. So they're sort of using the language of the past to evolve and create a new artistic language. Two examples of that, the work by Jed Quinn and then also Sigrun Holmwood. Now, Jed Quinn quotes the 17th century Italian landscape tradition of Claude Lorraine. And he directly quotes paintings by Claude Lorraine, and they're very much about sort of a idyllic utopian view of the world, essentially. But what Jed Quinn does then is sort of insert these horrors from the 20th century, such as Hitler's mountain retreat, or reference to the Waco siege, almost as a way of sort of fracturing our relationship to the past and problematising it in a sense, and questioning the way in which history is written and our relationship to history, and perhaps at what point does history become myth or myth become history. And they're very sort of powerful works. Another example of an artist sort of engaging with past art historic traditions is the work of Sigrun Holmwood. And when you first look at her works, I mean, they're incredibly sort of garish in a way, in the way in which she uses fluorescent paints such as yellows and oranges. But if you actually look at her process, she's all about the traditions of painting. So she makes all her own paints, and that might be, tempera, which is the use of egg white as a binder, or making her own oils. And then she grinds up her own pigments and sort of blends them, but creates something that looks so sort of ultimately synthetic. And then also the compositions or the stories that she's actually telling do quote sort of 17th century Dutch traditions, and then also the tradition of Vincent van Gogh. Historically, it's interesting if you look at the way in which contemporary and modern exhibitions have been accepted. It seems that, Adelaideans, or the state of South Australia, has been sort of more accepting of change and difference. And I'd like to think that that's actually still the case, and that people, South Australians will, come to this exhibition and really sort of engage and think about, the new and the unknown and the foreign, because it is, what we're being presented with here are essentially, unknown artists. There are ideas and ways of creating art that is, quite radically new. But I hope that even if they don't necessarily accept what they see, because I wouldn't want that necessarily, but that they come and engage and enter a dialogue with the works and sort of say, well, no, I don't like that because, of these reasons, or I think that's wonderful because, of these reasons. And I think that's really where art lives and has a relevance, I guess, within contemporary society if it can sort of stimulate that debate and that engagement.